Hello, Professor Toybox here with a special video for you today. A few weeks ago, several of the content creators on the Disney Infinity Discord, including 72 Pringle, Poppa H, All Night Gaming, and myself, decided to work together to come up with a variety of simple time challenges for you that you can easily build in the Disney Infinity Toy Box. This is my creation, the Endor speeder bike chase from the movie Return of the Jedi. Now, I wasn't able to get the speeder bikes to work the way I wanted, so we're going to be chasing probe droids instead. The goal of my time challenge is to chase them down and destroy them before they can reach the Imperial base on the other end of the toy box. Now, I'm going to play through this challenge first so you can see how it works, and then I'll show you how to build it. And in case you don't want to stick around for the build part of the video, I want to encourage you to check out the time challenges that the other guys have built too. I'll put the links for those in the video description and on my blog, and then once you've seen all of them, head on over to the Disney Infinity Discord and vote for your favorite. Okay, to start the challenge, we come over here to the challenge maker, step on that, and we say start the challenge. And here we go. Probe droids have landed. And now we gotta hop on the speeder bike and take off after them, and I accidentally hit the reverse. Oops. And we're traveling almost the same speed, a little bit faster than the probe droids. So we've got an opportunity to catch them. There's one. Now there's the other one. Whoa, crud. That's not good. Oh, lucky shot. 9 seconds to go. Oh my goodness. And 9.11 seconds to go. Wow. And here come my sparks. So that's my time challenge, and if I keep on going, we get down around this bend here a little bit, and you'll see the Imperial base is right here. So they almost reached the base. And here we are. The timer is just an estimate. I did several timing runs to see how long it took the droids to run the course, and that's what I set the timer to be. Anyway, now I'll show you how to build it. Okay, so here we are in an empty toy box, and I've already taken the liberty of using the sky changer to set the sky to be the sanctuary moon sky. And just in case you weren't aware how to do that, this toy comes out of the Instant Fun drawer, and you just go into the properties, change the sky to be under Disney Infinity 3.0, the sanctuary moon sky. And then I use the boombox over here to turn off the music. And that's all I've done. And so I've set the sky, and I've got the music turned off so you can hear me. For this piece of terrain, which is the default, we're going to use the Forest Moon of Endor, and I'll set that to be my theme. And there we go. And for the orientation of this, I kind of want to be traveling towards the Imperial base. And so I want to build either that direction or in that direction. And I chose to build out in this direction. And so what we're going to do here is come to the terrain drawer. And I'm not going to build this whole thing, but I'll kind of show you what I did. So we come over and, of course, I add this selected. But we can use the large flat block like we've got right here to start with. And we're going to put these down end to end. And for the terrain, I'm going to keep this simple and create a long row of these large flat pieces. I can place 11 of them before I run into the toy box size limit on my Wii U. So then I go back to the initial block and I place another 9 of them in the opposite direction. And that gives me a toy box that's 20 of these massive blocks long. And that's about as large as I can go on my Wii U. I can add 2 more blocks, but when I place all the trees on them and add the paths, there's just too much lag. For the trees, you can find these in 2 locations. The large redwoods are in building sets group 1, and you place these pieces by stacking them. So we can put the Ewok village trunk base here, and I'm putting this one about 1 block out from the corner on either side. And then you can come over to this foliage trunk, and you can go ahead and stack these up. And it's probably a good idea to rotate these a little bit so that it's not quite so repetitive. Like that. And then you can scroll over a little bit to the right and you've got 2 different tree toppers. You've got this one, which is a little bit shorter, that one, which is a little bit taller. And so that's how you can build a rather large tree that looks pretty good. And you can mix and match those pieces for some variety. Now the other set of trees are under the plants drawer. Oops. And we have these fantasy terrain pieces. So I used this one, and I use that one occasionally. This one I used a lot. I did not use that one, I skipped it. And if you set it, you'll see why I didn't use it, but these are all of the pieces that you need in order to add some nice variety to your forest. And so if we come over here to the end, and we format these like this. Here we have some ferns, and I won't make you watch me format all of these. I'll go ahead and just set these, and I'll fast forward. So you can see, here's what we have to work with. So we've got the ferns down here. We've got a stump with a little tree sprig next to it. We've got a larger tree, but still not as large as the ones we can build over there. And then we've got another one that's just as tall, but a little skinnier. We've got this fallen log. We've got kind of a little Ewok trap. And a couple of really nice corner pieces with a rock and some trees there. And another little Ewok trap here. I didn't use this particular one too much, but just once in a while for something to break it up. Now I'm not going to show you how to place each and every tree, because that would be boring to watch, and you don't need to be that precise. I'd rather focus on the logic for the challenge itself. But I'll do a slow flyover so you can see the entire toy box and how I've got it laid out, and that should be enough for you to recreate this on your own. So on this end of the toy box, with the Imperial base over there, I move the starting pad over here. And if I select the terrain block, you can kind of see where the trees are placed on the terrain block. And I'll spin around here so you can get a good look at this. And I'll move the cursor along the way because it likes to hide the trees a little bit. So this one's mostly open on this end with trees around the perimeter. You can pause this video along the way and recreate what you see here by placing the trees in roughly the same locations. Or you can mix it up and build your own forest however you want. The trees don't have to be precise. As long as you have them in relatively the same positions, you're going to end up with the same challenge I have. The trees can be a half a block or even a full block off of where I place them in your toy box, but it'll still work. Doesn't have to be precise. It took me about 2.5 hours to build the forest, so this is something you can do in a single sitting. I've used the trees to create 2 to 3 different lanes that you can race through, and you'll notice the lanes aren't straight. I've staggered the trees so it looks more natural, and you have to steer a little bit to get through this forest. But it gives you a choice of paths to take, and the probe droids can take different paths too. If you want to add more challenge, you can make the lanes narrower or add some obstructions like log ramps or an AT-ST walker parked in the middle of the lane. You can also tweak the terrain to add some gaps that you need to jump over or add some log ramps. It's up to you. You can make this as easy or as difficult as you want. You might also be able to add a third probe droid if you're on a system that can handle it. And you can see that I moved the sky changer and the boombox down. This was the original block that we started with in the empty toy box. And you don't have to pack it completely full of trees. You can have some areas that are open. We saw that in the Return of the Jedi movie. And as you can see there on the left, I've got a little Ewok village. And I'll come up above the terrain here so you can get a little bit better look at this. You don't really notice this while you're racing, but I thought it could be a fun little area that you can expand on as you're building your own toy box here. You can add some side quests or something up there. And it's kind of neat to catch a glimpse of that as you're racing through the toy box. And here I've got the path kind of taking a curve, so you don't have to make the lanes straight like this. You can kind of curve it and send it at an angle. So I thought that would be kind of fun for something a little bit different. That kind of gives you an idea how I spaced the trees for that angled lane. And I stuck that little fallen stump over there on the back end just to fill the space. I want to point out too that I haven't fully completed this toy box. I've built just enough for the challenge, and I added a few little surprises along the way, like the Ewok village and the trees. And then we ran another angled path down this direction. So you can finish this toy box off however you like. You can add some Imperial Scouts near the beginning that you can fight, or at the Imperial base. You can create some side quests in the Ewok village. There's all kinds of things you can do to flesh this out into a complete toy box adventure, and how you do that is completely up to you. And over here on this side, I placed a lot of ferns because I figured at this point we're getting close to the Imperial base, and I wanted the player to be able to see that a little bit more clearly out that way without covering it up. And then the last block is just a bunch of trees in the back behind the base, just to kind of put a nice border behind it. Alright, so now you've seen the toy box and you should have everything you need to build it. You know all the pieces I'm using, and you've got some video that shows you how the entire toy box is laid out from end to end. Now let's build the challenge itself. Okay, we're back at the starting end of the toy box, and to save a little time, I've already placed the Creativi-toys that we're going to need. And there's not that many because this is a very easy challenge to build. First we have a challenge maker, and a logic gate, a timer, a scoreboard. We have 2 enemy wave generators, 1 for each probe droid, and we have a locator for each probe droid, and a path for each probe droid to start on. And I've also placed a trigger area. And back here we have our speeder bike, and I've placed that even with the starting pad, and halfway between, roughly, between those 2 locators for the probe droid. And then this locator back here is the starting location for the player, and I want them to have to run up and hop onto the speeder bike the way they did in the movie. And so this locator, you can kind of see there how that's placed. And one thing I want to point out is that this locator here where the player starts needs to be far enough back from the probe droids so that they don't detect the player. We want them to hop on the path and start following the path. And so we need to make sure the player is far enough behind there where that doesn't happen. And so I've placed these locators right on the dividing line between these 2 terrain blocks. And that's where we have the locator for the player's start location. And you can tweak that a little bit if you need to make that work on your system. Okay, the other thing I want to point out before we begin, this trigger area actually should go at the opposite end, and we're going to move it there at the end. But to make it easy to connect, I've got it down on this end, so we don't have to go back and forth to connect these. And the same with the paths. I've only dropped down 1 path point here and made the paths very short. And so this way, that prevents a lot of lag, because as soon as we drag those paths all the way down to the other end, we're going to have some lag in this toy box. And again, you don't want to be running back and forth all the way to the other end. And this makes it very easy to test this thing out before you move all that stuff down there. Okay, let's start with the challenge maker. And we'll come down to the properties in the logic menu here. And the only thing we're going to change here is the results score label. I'm going to change that to time, because we want to know how quickly the player was able to destroy those probe droids. All of the rest of these can stay the same. Okay, let's do the enemy wave generators next. So on this one, we're going to do a new locator connection. We're going to connect up to that locator. That's where the probe droid will appear. And we'll also connect to the corresponding path. That's the path we want the enemy to follow. And you'll note when we come back to the enemy wave generator, the path option is no longer there. And so that's why I have 2 enemy wave generators, 1 for basically each of the paths. So each probe droid's going to follow his own path. So that's why I need 2 enemy wave generators. To configure the wave, we're going to add 1 probe droid. And under the properties, we're going to leave all of that the same. We're just going to take the generation delay to 0. And under toy box path, I'm going to set the speed to be 200. And we're going to set the movement style to one way and stop. And you're going to do the exact same thing with this enemy wave generator, but I won't take the time in this video to do that. Both of those need to be configured the same. For the scoreboard, we'll come to the properties for that, and we're going to play to 2 because we only have 2 probe droids. Win by 2 can be off, and those fields are fine the way they are. And lastly, the timer. We come to the properties for the timer, and as I mentioned earlier, I did some timing runs where I basically started the timer as the droids connected to the path, and when they reached the other end I paused the timer and took an average of those, and it's about 47 seconds. So that's what I'm going to set the target time to. And again, that just gives the player an estimate of how long it's going to take or how long they've got before the probe droids get there. And it might be off a second or so, but that's fine. And initially I want this to be off. We'll turn this on as the challenge starts. And that's it for the properties. All of the properties on everything is all set up. So let's come over to the challenge maker once more, and we're going to do a new locator connection. And this will be the starting location for player 1. They're going to start here behind the speeder bike. And let's see, which way do we want to go with this? Let's start with the timer, I guess. So we'll come over here and do a new logic connection. And on invites accepted, we're going to come over to the timer. Now there's two things I want to do on this timer as I open the menu. I want to do the timer display and turn that on initially, but at the same time I need a way to reset the timer. And so I'm going to do the show timer display here, and I'll get to the reset in a moment. And then on the challenge maker, we're going to do a new logic connection. On started, we want to come and start the timer. And back to the challenge maker, we'll do a new logic connection. And when the game is ended, so the player has won or they've lost, we're going to come over and pause the timer, because we need to record their time and lock it in. And then a new logic connection when the results are closed. We want to come over and hide that timer. And as you'll note, that doesn't give me anything else to key off of here to do the reset. And so that's why I have the logic gate sitting out there. It's really just going to be a pass-through. So we're going to do a new logic connection on invites accepted. I'm going to come over and do an input on the logic gate. And on the logic gate, we'll do a new logic connection on output, come over to the timer, and do a reset. And then one more thing on the challenge maker for the timer, we're going to do a new time results connection, because we're really interested in how quickly the player does this and the time it took them to do it. So we'll link to the timer for the results at the end. Okay, and that's it for the challenge maker and the timer. Now the other part of this is the losing condition for the player. And the player is going to lose when one of the probe droids crosses this trigger area, which we're going to put over to the other end. And so we're going to come over here and move and adjust this trigger area. And I'm going to stretch it to fill the entire width of the toy box. And so when any probe droid crosses that line, then the player loses the challenge because they've made it to the base. And so on the trigger area, we'll do a new logic connection when entered by AI enemy. We want to come over to the timer and go ahead and pause it. And also, while we're right here, on the trigger area, a new logic connection when entered by AI enemy. We're going to come over to the challenge maker and fail the game. So you have to catch those droids and destroy them before they reach that trigger area, which we're going to move to the other end. Alright, so that's everything with the trigger area. And that's everything with the timer. Just double checking my notes. Yep. Okay, so we've got our start location, we've got the timer set up. Let's do the scoreboard next. And so we'll come back over to the challenge maker and we'll do a new logic connection on invites accepted. we're going to come over to the scoreboard and do a reset, because the player might want to play this thing again several times. On the challenge maker, a new logic connection. On started, we're going to come over to the scoreboard and activate it. And on the challenge maker, a new logic connection. When the game is ended, we want to come and remove the display of the scoreboard. And a new logic connection when the results are closed at the very end and we're all done. Come back over to the scoreboard and we will deactivate it. And the purpose of the scoreboard is really just to help the player know, when they've destroyed one, the score will increment to 1. When they destroy the other, it goes up to 2. And so the scoreboard just kind of tells them if they've gotten one or whatever. And it also is going to help us. Actually, no, the scoreboard doesn't help us with that. Never mind. Sorry. Okay. So with that, nope, I take that back. There is one more connection here. And that is on the scoreboard. We'll do a new logic connection when the target score is reached. Then we come over to the challenge maker and complete the game. I knew there was one more thing there I was missing. Because we have 2 different enemy wave generators, and I could funnel connections from those through a dual action trigger and then connect over here, but I don't really need that extra toy because I got the scoreboard sitting over here. All right, so next thing we need is those probe droids. So on the challenge maker, we're going to do a new logic connection on invites accepted. We're going to come over to each of the enemy wave generators, and we're going to generate the wave. And that will cause the probe droids to appear so that they're ready to go when the challenge starts. And also, if the player happens to end the challenge, we probably just want to go ahead and on results closed, just make sure those probe droids did get deleted. Not sure whether we really need this or not, but we'll defeat the waves. I put this in mine just in case something weird happens. We want to make sure we don't have a couple of enemies floating around that shouldn't be there. There we go. Okay, and then on the enemy wave generator, we're going to do a new logic connection on each of these. And so when an enemy is defeated, so the player destroys the probe droid, we want to come over to the scoreboard and increment that by 1 for player 1. And again, this is just a single player challenge. And we do the exact same thing with this one. When an enemy is defeated, come over and connect to the scoreboard and increment by 1. So that way the scoreboard is keeping track when we destroy the enemies. And I believe that is everything. That's everything you need in order to build this game. And so the last thing you would do then, now that we have this, you can go ahead and save. You can test this out. And of course, the player is going to, when you start the challenge, those probe droids are going to hit this trigger area pretty quick. So that allows you to test the ending condition of the game. And then if you want, you can move this trigger area down away from the droids a little bit so that you have time to run over here and shoot them before they can wander into that trigger area. And you can verify that when you destroy both probe droids, then you complete the game. So once you've tested all of that out, then you can come over here and do the rest of this So the first thing we'll do is we'll move this trigger area all the way to the other end of the toy box. And this is a very long toy box. And we're going to put this over here, something like that. And if you want, you can come over to the Building Sets Group 7 and add a couple of railings over here that kind of help the player to know where that finish line is. And that kind of gives you a nice entrance to the base as well. And then once you've done that, then the next thing to do is to set up the paths. And I'll fast forward and meet you at the other end of the toy box in just a moment. Okay, here I am back at the start of my toy box. And so I'm going to start by picking up the point for this path and moving it. And we're going to probably back this up just a little bit and move this over a tad. And then we'll come in here and hit X on my Wii U to start adding the next point. And so I'm going to start creating a path here that the probe droid can follow. And you don't have to do it exactly as I'm doing it. You can have this path follow any path you want through these trees. So if you want it to be a little bit easier, you can kind of keep it going somewhat straight down that way. And that's actually not a very bad thing to do here for the very beginning of the toy box, because it's going to take a little while for the player to catch up to this. It's usually at least a third of the toy box to a half before I catch up to it. And so kind of having it in view so the player can find it and start to move towards it to catch up is a really good thing. And of course, the longer you make this, the crazier it gets sometimes with the paths. So we don't want to do have them be too far apart, because the curves get kind of weird, but we can come back and adjust this a little bit later on. So I'm just kind of following down this little path that I've created with my trees. And this is going to be just one of several possible paths. And so actually I'm going to put another point like right here. And this one, I'm going to have this go straight, pretty much. Like this. And now we come up here to this point, and we have a decision to make. And I'm going to have this thing kind of angle over to the left for right now. You can see I had 3 different paths with that one where I could pick from. And I try to drop a point here about like this that I can branch off of later. And so this way I have a choice. I can give the probe droid of which way to go. As you can see, this is a really long toy box. When you start putting this together and doing the paths. And yet, even on a speeder bike with a toy box this long, it still takes only 47 seconds to get to the other end. Now you can kind of see the trigger area down there in the distance. And maybe the probe droid will come and cut through here. And if you need to, you can kind of turn around and just make sure the path is makes sense. Because see, I had this way too far over and that path curved a little bit too far back there. So it can kind of be helpful sometimes to turn around because you want a nice smooth curving path. You don't want this, you don't want the probe droid to be going in a lot of weird directions. And then we'll cross the finish line and put the last point here inside the base, and then we'll exit. So there's our first path. And we can come back through along here and tweak it if we need to. If there's any weird turns, or if the path did anything weird behind us after we drew it. And this one looks pretty smooth. I think this one turned out pretty good. Just a little bit of a hiccup there. That's kind of weird. So we could maybe move this point over just a tad, but then that kind of makes that path back there look a little wonky. So, yeah, it'll probably be all right. But you get the idea. And now that you have a full path coming through the toy box, then you can add some branches. And I would recommend starting on this end. And you want to start down on this end because you want the branches that you start with to be somewhat smaller. And so for like right here, we could have this branch off. So I'll press L on my Wii U to create a branch. And we'll kind of come maybe this direction around that tree. And then come straight to the base. And put this about right across from the other one. So that gives the probe droid a choice of which way they want to go around that tree. And then we can come back a little further, say back here to this one, and do another branch. And maybe this one we want to come this direction. Make sure we're moving in a good line here. And have the probe droid come this direction. So you can set up a number of choices here. Now I wouldn't go crazy with these branches because the more branches you create, remember we got one more path we have to do yet too. But the more branches you create, as you'll see when we go along here in a moment, it stops drawing the line connecting the points. And so this can get a little bit difficult to figure out where you've branched off from. That's why I kind of recommend starting on this end when you do this. And right now we still have, exit, we still have the lines drawn. So as you can see, just going to create some paths through the forest, and at each of the branching points, the probe droid, that's the object on the path, will randomly choose which way it wants to go. And so you're going to do the exact same thing with the other path. You can add some more branches. You can set this thing up any way you want. And I'll fast forward and show you the final result that I've got. Alright, we're back at the start of the toy box, and as you can see, after creating the other path, this one is not drawing the connecting point, the connecting line between the points. And so that's why I say you don't want to go too crazy with the branches, because you're going to stop being able to see the connecting line, and it's going to be harder to know where the path actually goes. The last thing I want to show you though is on these points. So on the very first point on this path, under the properties, come down to the path point options. I've set the speed modifier to 25 on this one, so that the probe droid gets off to a somewhat slow start. Because if you don't do this, the probe droid is going to be so far out in front of you, you'll never catch it. And on the second point, I've set it to 40, so it's picking up a little bit of speed. This one I set to 60, that one I set to 80. So by the time he reaches this point, he's trucking along at full speed. And the same with the path on the other side. So you want to make sure you have the speed modifier set on those accordingly. And you can tweak that as you play around with it and decide if you need the probe droid to start slower or if you want him to start faster. But there you go. You've got a fun time challenge that looks and feels a lot like the original speeder bike chase in Return of the Jedi. I hope you've enjoyed my video today. Be sure to check out the time challenges that the other guys have made, and then head over to the Disney Infinity Discord and vote for your favorite. The links are in my video description and on my blog. Also, leave a comment to let me know what you think of mine, and give it a like if you enjoyed it. Until next time, thanks for watching, and take care.